Good morning, Dan and Amy. And in for Amy this morning is Chicago Tribune's John Cass. And this is sort of an interesting commercial, fun one, and interesting in context. Dan Rodemer is a former WWE guy.
Wrestling?
Wrestling. Who is now running in the special election in Texas's 6th Congressional District. That's the seat, that vacancy for that seat created by Representative Ron Wright's death. He's a Republican, but that seat has been sort of trending Democrat. That area has been trending Democrat, but Ron Wright was a Republican who held it for a while, so it'll be interesting to see how the special election works out. But even more interesting is the some of the issue choices and the communication about those issues that Dan Rodemer has chosen in a campaign video he's posted.
Three dirtiest jobs in the world: professional wrestling, politician, and bull riding. Let's go, boys!
We call that bull Nancy Pelosi. It's the beast.
Now that's Texas tough, baby. 2 out of 3 dirty jobs done. I'm Big Dan Rodeheimer. Texas has big problems. We need a big fighter to solve those problems. The communists in D.C. are ruining America. We have a big problem. Texas. Send Big Dan to Congress. I know how to handle Nancy Pelosi and stop her bull. And I'll put a boot right in her socialist platform.
You know what? It reminds me of...
Well, it looks like I already did. Men and women's bathrooms, boys and girls sports, higher taxes, higher gas prices. They're building a wall around D.C., but they're not protecting our borders. They're laughing at us. Now they're going to try to take away our guns?
Oh, hell no.
I moved my family of 7 back to Texas because I wanted to raise my kids in a constitutional-friendly state. Here in Texas, we are free. We live free. We are a threat to those in power. They hate Texas. They hate our way of life. The communists in D.C. want to shut down our churches, close our businesses, indoctrinating our children, communism in our classrooms, make our daughters unsafe in sports and school, destroy American borders and our American history. We must stop them. Hire me to represent you, and I'll go to D.C. and kick some left-wing ass. Voters in the Texas 6th Congressional District, vote Big Dan in the special election. I'll fight for you and the Texas way of life. Let's make America Texas again.
Sounds like...
Let's make America Texas again. I like that.
Like he's trying it out for Fox News. But
well, here's
the thing is, it should be Stone Cold Steve Austin running for senator in Alaska. You ever see that movie Condemned? He was born in a small fishing village somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Here's the thing that's interesting about that. One, it's a swing district, so we'll see how Rodemer does.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that somebody has the courage to take up the issue of boys playing boys sports and girls playing girls sports.
Yeah, that sounds. There's a few people taking up that issue.
Well, right. I mean, when Jeannie Ives did it, when she challenged Bruce Rauner in the Republican primary for governor, she, of course, was roundly excoriated and made national news. Not roundly excoriated, roundly excoriated by the left, who went hysterical about it, even though it was just simply a factual representation of the policies that Bruce Rauner supported, surrender Republican. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of Republicans who want to take this up. And in point of fact, former conservative darling, Christine Noem in South Dakota, and her equivocation on the issue. Well, why? Why are they so afraid?
She's scared of them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the politics.
Well, it's just interesting because it seems like it's one of those issues that's overwhelmingly
commonsensical.
Yeah. And yet that is just too difficult a bridge to cross for politicians, including a lot of Republicans, including some erstwhile conservatives. I think the Christine Noem reversal is really telling.
She's not running for president now.
For more on this, the trans sports issue, we're pleased to be joined by Terry Schilling, Executive Director of the American Principles Project, and Frank Mir, who is a sports commentator, two-time heavyweight UFC champion, who's also making his professional boxing debut. next month. We'll talk to Frank momentarily. Terry, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, John and Dan.
So, what about, Big Dan and his rather colorful campaign video is one thing, but, it's sort of this juxtaposition of insurgent candidates, if you will, like him running for Congress in a swing district in Texas, versus somebody who is safely ensconced in the governor's mansion in South Dakota, but punting on the issue nonetheless.
So this is an issue, this not letting boys compete in girls' sports. You hit it on the head. It's a common sense issue. It doesn't take much thinking. In fact, you only get in trouble when you overthink this issue. The caving from Kristi Noem is because she's worried about the economic factor. Woke corporations and the NCAA have been threatening boycotts of states that do any type of pushback on these cultural issues. You saw what happened in Indiana, where the NCAA was threatening to pull tournaments from the state, and you had, GamerCon withdrew there. North Carolina, they passed a bathroom bill. And look, these corporations, they don't really care about making money anymore, or they're just not afraid of Republicans revoking their privileges in retaliation. But Kristi Noem caved to the corporations, but these guys like Dan Rodheimer, they don't have the corporations on board yet. They just have the people, and that's who they have to convince. And I think it's a very telling fight.
So it seems to me, these schisms, if you will, within GOP and conservative ranks, the college degreed versus the non-college degreed in some respects, those who want to ally with corporate America and those who don't seems to be another one that's really developing.
Exactly. This is the one blessing one big blessing I think that Trump gave to the Republican Party is he made it much more working class. I think that, I have 5 kids, Dan, as you know, and I don't want my kids to go to college. I'd rather give them the, $100,000 that I'm going to spend on college and have them start a business. I found that, that's who the new Republican Party is going to be made up of. It's going to be made up of plumbers and electricians and pipe fitters and working class people, pizza guys like my dad.
Yeah, entrepreneur, right? Entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, on this issue though, so what's your handle on why it's so difficult to stand for this common sense position of you don't want a boy identifying as a girl, especially in an era of safetyism as the means to control. You don't want you make the safety argument for boys not competing especially in sports that involve physical contact with girls. Why can't conservatives see their way through to stand up for girls in sports like that?
This is the most egregious part of this issue. Is you're exactly right. There literally is no reason to support the left's efforts to allow boys to compete in our daughters' sports. The only reason it's happening and the only reason that these politicians are caving is because they're cowards. They cave to the corporate interests, the woke, capital boards, and the NCAA. They're worried about how this is going to impact jobs in their state. And this is what was frustrating about Kristi Noem is she had this teed up right here. You have a governor who stood up to the COVID shutdowns, who didn't buckle under that. She could have easily said, I've been pressured by the chambers of commerce, the NCAA. They're threatening to economically punish my state. They're acting like economic terrorists because they want us to allow boys to compete in girls' sports. Well, I'm here to tell you, I'm not going to sell out our daughters for any amount of jobs. We're going to protect our daughters, and if the chambers of commerce and the NCAA want to fight over this, that's good. We can look at the tax-exempt status of the NCAA for getting involved politically, or we can look at raising the tax rates in in South Dakota. But these guys are going to have to choose between the good economic regulations in our state or allowing boys to compete here.
When do the churches get involved here? Because ultimately, I think most people don't want to be rude or hurtful to anyone who's undergoing this transgender situation. No one wants to discriminate against individuals or hurt their feelings or attack them. But at the same time, the policy issues are fundamentally, changing the sexual roles And ultimately, I mean, if you want to go back to Genesis, it was a man and a woman in terms of what churches believe is fundamental to them. So where are the churches?
The church, there still are some really good churches, and there are some really great pastors who preach about this. I was actually, a few months ago, I was in California, and I'm a Catholic, but the Catholic churches all out in California, they make you register. You have to basically get tickets in order to go to church beforehand, and I didn't get tickets, so I ended up going with some friends to a Bible church, and the entire sermon was about this. It was about the transgender sports issue, Black Lives Matter being Marxist. It was about pornography and how rampant it was. It was incredible. I mean, it addressed all these major issues that we're facing in the country.
Do you see, gentlemen, do you see, either one of you, Dan or Terry, do you see that this policy that Biden has adopted will ultimately push up and push down or whatever on religion and on Americans' understanding?
It's a civil rights issue of our time, John. That's what Joe Biden has said. But of course it will. Of course, there's going to be a fight. You're not going to, you're not going to be allowed to think Christian thoughts. That's where this is going. I mean, that's the fight that's ahead of us. Look at what's happening to our friend Masterpiece Cake Shop being dragged into court yet again. It just never ends. And here's the thing that's so interesting. In terms of conservatives, because this is where the action is. So conservatives have no problem standing up to corporate interests when it comes to border security, because Fortune 500 doesn't support the conservative position on border security and illegal immigration, and yet we're losing that. And then they won't stand up. It's in so many instances to corporate America when it comes to this nonsensical policy that we're talking about. It's not at a place of hate. It's at a place of just, as I said, common sense and to some extent safety. And yet we're losing on that. We're losing everywhere. Whether we stand up to corporate America, we don't stand up to corporate America. Whether corporate America gets involved to push boycotts or whether it doesn't.
I do think that, while I did find that great church out in California, that's the exception. It's not the rule. I mean, for every one of those good churches, you have another 10 that have the rainbow flag in front. And, what I will say is the left has already beaten down so many of our religious leaders in this country. I mean, where's the Franklin Grahams of this world? I mean, we have Joel Osteen has replaced Franklin Graham.
Oh,
that's not gonna work.
I'm sorry, Billy Graham. It's not going to work.
Yeah,
and it's just a total disaster. But there's been this whittling down of religion in America. There was a new survey came out, I think it was from Pew, that showed that only 47% of Americans are members of a church. And that's down from 70% in 1999. It's concerning.
Well, here's the other thing, too. We take solace, or some do, in the fact that you have states passing these bans on trans participation in sports. So, I mean, basically saying boys in boys sports, girls in girls sports, like Arkansas just did last week. And it seems to me eerily reminiscent of like the referendums against marriage redefinition, and it was 34 states in a row that put it to the people. It was shot down 34 times, and it didn't matter because the Supreme Court was ready to go, and that's what. And that's, of course, we know what transpired. Seems to be the same thing here. You're going to have all these states pass laws, even if Noam signs the legislation in South Dakota. And because you have lost control of so many other institutions, it's very likely that either the federal government or the court, perhaps, we'll see, I don't know, even in a conservative-leaning court, comes over the top the way it did on marriage redefinition.
Now, the Bostock decision was just a nightmare. I mean, I remember being so upset when that came out. That you look at how Gorsuch wrote his opinion in that, and this is the decision that basically redefined sex in civil rights law in Title VII, which is unemployment, which is employment law, to be gender identity and sexual orientation. And you look at how he wrote it. He wrote it in a way where a decision on Title IX, which is what deals with sports and educational opportunities, he could go either way on Title IX. So it's very concerning. It's like the Supreme Court really just goes with whatever way they think the winds are blowing because they don't want to be outside elite opinion. Because they're an elite institution, they want to be able to go to the cocktail parties. We're not in a good spot. But the good thing is 30 states have introduced this legislation, like you said, Dan, And the people, it's like, it's so obvious where the people are, where the voters are, and then where our elites are. They're so out in left field, it's not even funny.
Left field, literally. Terry Schilling, Executive Director, American Principles Project. Terry, thanks for joining us. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Terry.
Thanks, Dan. See you guys.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
If you purchase your own health insurance, I have some great news. From now until August 15th, the health insurance exchanges are open again. And even if you've never qualified for a health insurance subsidy before, you most likely will now. The American Rescue Plan, signed on March 11th, expanded subsidy eligibility to millions of Americans who have never qualified.